This is the 3 Arts Workshop, Week 8, and this last week we're looking at basics of Socratic discussion. We've been doing a bit of Socratic discussion in this class, but let's put down a definition. What is it? What is Socratic discussion? Socratic discussion, or dialectic, these are the arts of dialectic, and we can see all of our tools we've studied this far culminating in the art of dialectic, is the art of truth-seeking through question-asking. Socrates discovered this fundamental truth about the way that we come to know things at a deeper level. It's often best done through question-asking, through the interrogation of our assumptions to arrive at some new, higher, deeper, broader truth. And we see this technique come to us in all of the Platonic dialogues. And there is a kind of fundamental technique, a basic technique Socrates employs to get at that higher, broader, deeper level of truth we all want to comprehend. Well, how does that work? There are 2 techniques of challenging assumptions via Socratic, and here I'm helped out, at least in my division of terminology, by Peter Kreeft's Socratic Logic textbook. I've referenced this previously in this series of videos. It really is a very helpful text. He mentions 2 basic techniques that belong to Socrates: moving upstream and moving downstream. Let's say a bit about each of these. Moving upstream means challenging the premises of our interlocutor, or that is our conversation partner's argument. Challenging the premises. Downstream is highlighting unbelievable implications that result from the thesis of our partner. So let's look at some concrete examples of each of these in action. My friend Joe says, I think everybody is entitled to his or her taste when it comes to art, movies, and music. Now, if I'm taking the upstream route, I want to challenge the premises of that conclusion. So I ask, why do you think that? Joe gives me his premise. He gives me his reason. He gives me an argument. He says, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, that's the premise on which his thesis, his first statement, rests. So if I'm moving upstream, if I'm taking the upstream technique, I want to challenge that premise. I want to show that that premise is maybe not as solid as Joe thinks it is. So I might ask a question like this: isn't that a problematic premise? If beauty is only subjective preference, what do we make of the Scripture's call to behold the beauty of the Lord? Is God's beauty our subjective preference? See, a moment ago, Joe said, all beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That gets complicated if we start thinking about God's beauty, especially if Joe and I share a foundation in the Christian tradition. Can we really say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder if God's beauty is not? We feel uncomfortable saying something like God's beauty belongs to our subjective preference. Does that maybe undermine this foundational assertion that beauty is ultimately up for grabs and a matter of taste? That's the upstream technique. Let's look at the downstream technique. Take the same argument. Joe says, I think everybody is entitled to his or her taste when it comes to art, movies, and music. To take the downstream technique, I don't actually need to get at any of Joe's premises. I just need to show how this thesis can result in ridiculous conclusions if taken to be its own premise. I might respond something like this: but surely you don't really believe that. And here's an important point that Kreeft underlines. It's easier to go upstream. That is, it's easier to look at premises and challenge those. Downstream has the benefit of giving us an opportunity to challenge the thesis, challenge what Joe is really trying to say. And the benefit of this is that this thesis is the thing Joe is ultimately tied to. Kreeft says, if you go upstream and you challenge a premise, it may be that Joe just comes up with a different premise for believing the same thing. But if I take the downstream technique and I show how this thesis results in ridiculous other conclusions, then I am forcing Joe to deal with the main thing that he wants to believe, the main thing that he wants to think. And you do this not by saying, Joe, you're an idiot. You do it by saying, you don't really believe that, right? You give your interlocutor the benefit of the doubt, saying that you haven't really thought through this well. And perhaps when you're giving me this articulation of your thesis, you're not actually giving me the sharpest, clearest iteration of what it is you're actually trying to say. So you give your conversation partner the benefit of the doubt. You say, surely you don't really believe that, at least not how you phrased your point right there. If I said that Hannah Montana's Pumpin' Up the Party is a superior piece of music to Bach's Goldberg variations, wouldn't you sense that I said something ridiculous? We also talk about this kind of move in argumentation being a reductio ad absurdum, reducing your conversation partner's argument to absurdity by showing what kinds of other propositions, ridiculous propositions, the person has to embrace if he or she embraces this first point. If you believe X, you also have to believe Y and Z, both of which are insane. So this is the downstream technique, which we align with the reductio ad absurdum. And it is particularly effective because it gets at the heart of the matter, which is the main thesis that the conversation partner is putting forward. So what do you have to know for the quiz? You just have to know the names of these two techniques, upstream, downstream, and you have to be able to define each of them. Upstream is challenging the premises, downstream is highlighting unbelievable implications, reductio ad absurdum. And that's it.